All right. Welcome back to the Potential Within podcast. We are super excited today. We have been featuring all of our superstar vendor partners from the Potential Within Summit that's coming up on June 5th. We're super excited about Potential Within 2.0. And have a great lineup of not only amazing vendor partners, but also just people that are doing amazing work in the space. So I'm going to turn over to Heidi and let Heidi do an amazing introduction to Courtney. So Heidi, over to you.
Thank you, Allie. And whether it'll be amazing or not, we shall see. But, I am excited to introduce, a lot of people know Courtney in the community. She's a great community resource, and it took me a long time to actually take the leap, whatever the question is. But actually, I met Courtney at last year's Potential Within Summit. And I had several other practitioners that have been part of my journey suggest that I work with Courtney and at least meet her and so forth. So I did. I had a great conversation with her at the Potential Within Summit and actually scheduled my first and future appointments that day. But Courtney is a pelvic floor physical therapist. And I will admit, I had no idea what a pelvic floor physical therapist was. I had my babies, 20 plus years ago. Pelvic floor physical therapy was not a thing. If it was, no one was talking about it.
Of course not. Why would we talk about such important things? Got to keep it quiet, right?
Right. So, but I have been seeing Courtney since December, early part of December, and going on a regular basis, even to the point I just was in this week, and we miss each other when I don't get in. Because not only is Courtney helping me with, and I went in for, probably what I thought was one thing, and it's actually we focused on a lot of different things, and Courtney can share more about that. But I'm at that stage of life where I'm starting to have a little bit of incontinence, but I also have lower back pain, and who would have known that maybe those two things are related? And as well as other things like being tongue-tied and, some of those things. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Courtney. Courtney, we'd love for you just to share more about yourself. Why did you choose, as a physical therapist, why did you choose pelvic floor therapy as your niche? And, why you do what you do.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you guys so much for having me. I always love talking about the pelvic floor and women's health and just wellness in general and what's out there. But like they said, I'm a pelvic floor therapist. I graduated with my PT degree in 2018 and just kind of worked around the metro of Des Moines in multiple different settings, the hospitals, the rehab centers, outpatient clinics for a handful of years. And I always kind of had a thought about doing women's health and whatnot, but it didn't happen until I was pregnant with my first in 2018, and I went to pelvic floor therapy a couple times, and it was even just in a couple of visits, it was just life changing to me of just the way that my body felt while I was, especially in the late stages of pregnancy and right before delivery and whatnot. And I was very naive going into labor and delivery and just kind of like, I'm an athlete, I can show up, I can do this. Like, didn't really like get into the nitty gritty of what actually was birth. And I think if you have had kids, you kind of you know what I'm talking about of you just can't really explain it fully until you've experienced it. And so that was, I had a vaginal delivery and just kind of thought to myself, like, it just kind of went and it happened and no major, difficulties or problems, I would say. And then I did a little bit of therapy afterwards for myself, and then I felt fine. I was like, cool, I'm back to running. I'm not peeing my pants, none of that. And then a couple years later, I had my second baby, and in 2020, of all the years, but it ended up being an emergency C-section. And I was not prepared for this, not mentally, not physically. And then afterwards, it was so different than my vaginal delivery. And we were in a very uncertain time, right? And it was just very traumatic experience for me, especially just because even the fact of my husband wasn't with me when I was first going into the hospital, because I was just at an appointment. And so we had to call him to come, and I was like, he barely made it
Mm.
for this big abdominal surgery. And that I, again, until you experience it, you have no clue what that entails. And so I went to pelvic floor physical therapy after this birth because I wanted to better understand what should I be doing because I just knew that it was different. And there was just something missing for me at that appointment. And I only went to one place. I didn't really like quote unquote shop around or anything. Um, but I knew what I was looking for was not what I got.
Mm.
And that really is what spurred, all that to be said, is what spurred my trajectory into pelvic health. And I knew that physical therapists are not mental health counselors, they're not emotional coaches on like in description. Um, but I didn't feel that I was getting that. And I was sent home with just a couple exercises and was like, come back if you have any issues. And it was like, okay, like I got to figure out what that means. And so I went to so then I decided to go to a continuing education course for pelvic floor. And that was in January of 2021. And this was like 3 months after I gave birth to via C-section. And so that kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of everything. And I started to really understand how the pelvic floor is actually connected to literally everything in the body. It is affected by so many things, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and how my own birth trauma was being stored in my pelvic floor, even though I didn't give birth vaginally. And that all tied up into what I could do with my physical therapy degree. And I was starting to do this a little bit in the healthcare system. And I just realized that I had so many barriers to treat the way that I wanted to treat. And that is really what spurred my own business. And so I went off on my own and just kind of jumped head first. I thankfully had a very supportive husband. And I started just getting as much of business coaching as I could. And my husband and I decided on a budget. It was just like, here's what you have to spend to start your own business. And a lot of that money went to business coaching to help me figure out how to run a business. I knew I had the skill, I knew I had the passion and the mindset, but I just needed to understand the logistics. And so that is how Revive was born, basically. And really, all that background is the passion that is in our walls today with all of our therapists. I have three therapists. One of them is also my administrative assistant. She's a PTA, so she can kind of jump back and forth between care and managing our place. And we all just kind of have our own birth stories. And I should not exclude my most recent birth, I guess. I did a VBAC last May, which was very, very important to me and very healing to me, which has just only sent our trajectory more into helping women understand what is available to them and what resources are in the community and how we can fight for what we want and what we deserve and advocate for ourselves. And that's really just like the heartbeat behind what we do and why we do what we do.
Thank you. So, if there's people out there that are like me, were like me, what is can you explain what the pelvic floor actually is?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I had my pelvic model.
You'll
But
share more
it
at the
is,
summit. You'll share more at the
yeah,
summit, but just in
it will be at
general,
the
yeah.
summit. Penny
Yeah.
the pelvis will be at the summit. Don't worry. Um, Yes, we did name her. So basically, the pelvic floor muscles are like a hammock that run from your pubic bone in the front to the back to the tailbone and kind of attached to all the pelvic bones in that region. And it is a pressure control system that kind of helps manage the pelvic floor. from the abdominal cavity down into the pelvis, but it basically upholds your bladder, your uterus, your ovaries, your rectum. For men too, you think about the prostate in there as well instead of the uterus. All of those organs that are down in that region is being upheld by the pelvic floor muscles. And it also is so correlated with the back muscles, the hip muscles, and or the glutes, and then the abdominals as well.
Mm-hmm. So when someone does finally make the decision to come see you, just to kind of walk us through what that journey looks like, the experience that you love being able to share with them, and just, the education awareness, and then also the treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. So most people do come to us for pelvic floor symptoms. We do get a handful of patients that are coming because they've had chronic back pain or hip pain and maybe wondering or have heard somewhere that the pelvic floor can be related to that. But a lot of times it is pelvic floor. So what people can expect is an internal vaginal exam, sometimes an internal anal exam, especially if it's a male. That's the only way in. And so um, and people have the right to decline, but we just really believe that the internal exam is the gold standard because pelvic floor muscles aren't necessarily something that you can see activating all the time. You really need to feel what's going on in there. So we do an assessment internally. We also will look at abdominals, we'll look at glutes, low back muscles, we'll look at how the hip joints are moving, how the back joints are moving. Sometimes we'll even come up into the neck. Maybe not on the first visit, but as you work with us, you'll start to understand why we're looking at everything because it's all connected. And so, yes, we have a specialty in pelvic floor, but I really just think that makes us so much more holistic and all-encompassing that we're looking at everything going on. We'll be looking at your breath. Um, and just the way that your rib cage is moving. But we will also do an in-depth history. So we'll go through if you have had babies, we'll go through every birth, we'll go through every pregnancy. If you've had any other injuries or surgeries or health complications, we'll talk through all of that. If um, if there's been, I was trying to figure out how I want to say this, but we really do believe that mental and emotional health is very big in our physical health, and so we will dive into that. We will not prescribe, we will not diagnose, we will not do any of that. It's more of let me get to know you where you're at and we can connect with you and then make sure that you have the right resources, but also educate a lot on how those things are tied to the pelvic floor and how they're tied to the body. And if we've had big T traumas or little T traumas of emotional neglect or mental neglect or whatever that is, and how that can really play a role. And then along the way, we'll help you find a counselor. We refer a lot for this. A lot of people are having more and more of their own counselors already, which is fantastic. But that is just a really big piece that we don't want to go untouched. And partly that is from my own experience too of I didn't really feel like I got that in my pelvic floor examinations, and that is just something that we have the ability to have those conversations, and I think it's just really important to educate on that. And then depending on what you're in there for, if you're in there for pregnancy, we go through labor and delivery prep. You don't even have to have pain. Like you don't even have to have symptoms to come in. If you just want to get labor and delivery prep, we go through again resources, mental health counselors, doulas, midwives, all of that. And then we do postpartum recovery. If there's symptoms, if there's not, if you want to just get stronger, make sure you don't have diastasis recti, any of that. That's not all in one visit. That's a series of visits based on your needs and your goals.
What would you say then is kind of the percentage, and we didn't ask you to prepare for this, but just top of mind, between kind of those that are pregnant, either pre or post, or those that might even be, later on in life, like myself?
So 90% of our clientele is women. And I would say of those 90%, I would say it's like 50-50. We have childbearing years, or very recent out of childbearing years, and then we have those that are more into your age category, that it's been more years, 10, 20 plus years since having kids.
Sorry.
My age
I had
category.
to laugh. Heidi, that's your age.
Hey, you said it. You said my age.
Courtney, it's great. That was great.
She
Good
was just
job.
going with what was fed to her.
Yeah.
She was like, for you old ladies that come to me.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm
That's
definitely
good.
not childbearing, so
Hey,
You're not
you
childbearing.
could
It's
be.
never too late.
You
You
never
could
know.
you
Courtney,
never know.
I need to know. So I have a question. Inquiring
Yeah.
minds want to know. I am a runner, and I
Yeah.
ran up until the day I delivered all three of my children in both of my pregnancies. Are you counting
Okay.
that? So my first one, I ran, I think on the treadmill 3 miles, January 13th, and had Olive on the 14th. Like my water broke like in the middle of the night. But
Mhm.
my OB told me that because I was running, I ruined my lady bits. Just call them that.
Okay.
Because I was running. Is that true? Like, did I really do that?
No.
Because I didn't care. I had twins 2.5 years later, and I ran not up until the day I had them. But I did run most of my pregnancy until I got put on bed rest.
Yeah,
So
that's
like,
impressive.
but did I do that? Like, did I do
No.
it? I mean, I feel
No.
like so many women are out there thinking that like they shouldn't be exercising because of. And my dad was a physician, and I remember, and my dad was not alive when I had my children, but I remember when my sister was pregnant, my dad was around, and we talked a lot about like exercise while being pregnant, and he was like, that is so not true. And so my mindset when I went in to having my children was that I should be able to exercise, and just because someone is like, whatever. So I want you to tell the world that it is okay to exercise while you're pregnant.
It
Of course,
definitely is.
everyone's different, but
Yep. Everyone's different. And the thing about this is two. I have like two lanes of answer of this. One, no, you should be exercising. Sometimes you have to modify things. I would say if you were not a runner and then you got pregnant and then you were like, I'm gonna go like run a half marathon. I mean, maybe we should think
yeah,
about that a little bit.
that might be
But
common sense, Courtney. But I mean, we're not talking about common sense here today. We're talking
no,
about pelvic floor.
absolutely. And so I think that's just like those are the big things. Is what were you doing before you got pregnant? And if you can sustain them, great. Could you increase pressures down in the pelvic floor if you were not breathing appropriately or getting good warm ups or really controlling for things? Can you create symptoms down there? Definitely. Can you also get help to manage that while you're running and doing all that? Absolutely. And so I think it just, again, it depends person to person. And I think what also is a little bit hard is sometimes people are pretty sick for that first trimester. And
Mm-hmm.
so like working out is like the last thing on their mind. And then on second trimester, they're like, oh, I feel better. I want to get back into it. I think it's just remembering to maybe ease in a little bit just because technically you kind of been on bed rest for like 13 weeks or 14, 15, however long you've been feeling sick.
Yeah,
Just remembering to ease back into it.
yeah,
But it is so important. And I also think that things have just really changed over the last couple, especially in the last 5 to 10 years. And in the last few years of just this wellness boom and understanding now. And I think the other hard part is pregnant women are like so protected in the research world.
yeah.
And so we have very little research on it.
Right.
And so I think that's difficult and challenging. And nothing against like OBs and midwives and everything. But they don't even know about the pelvic floor. They like don't even know what it is. They don't have the education around it. And so I think it's really hard for them to make those statements.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really going to find an expert who literally I'm in vaginas daily, and that is what I'm treating. And a pelvic exam by a pelvic floor therapist is very different than a pelvic exam by an OB.
Yeah.
And so I think that is it's so hard to make that statement that you shouldn't be working out.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like menopause, perimenopause, right? Like we know nothing about that. We get maybe judged for it. It's kind of the flip side before that happens, right? So we should be talking about this, like as we're doing, is this holistic journey around, you know, the female body, which, and I know I'm not saying that, Courtney, you don't see men as well. You do. I totally get it. But for what we're trying to do here is like, there's so much more out there that we're just not talking about. And we're frankly, like, I think a lot of women, like Heidi, you and I have talked about this, like, we don't know where to go or what to do, or, you know, and just highly uneducated, no offense, but like, that's essentially what's happening, right? Is that we're uneducated. And that's what the Potential Within is all about, is educating everyone on all of the different resources. So
absolutely.
Anything else, Courtney, that you want to make sure that we know about what you're doing and how you're doing it, and what things that people like just wouldn't think of?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of alluded to it too already, but just because you've never had babies or you had babies a long time ago, like it's never too late. And just because we say pelvic floor doesn't mean we're not treating the whole body. And I think I will say one thing at our office, especially my patients that I see, I love the chronic complexities. I think too, there's just been such a long generation of lack of education. And so therefore we have people that are having back pain, and Heidi, to pull on you if you don't mind, like the back pain, the incontinence, um, all of those things are so wrapped up together. And I am going to share a little bit more about Heidi's story of just trying multiple different facets, trying physical therapy in the past that just didn't get to it. And we're continuously having these issues. And then they start compounding. Maybe it started as back pain and now we're having leakage. But if you're not looking at the full picture, many people will think those are two separate things. Oh, it's my pelvic floor and it's my back. It's like, well, those back muscles actually attach to the pelvis, which is where the pelvic floor muscles attach, which those can all be all encompassing. And if we're not taking care of the breathing and the belly tension and those kind of things, we're also going to have pressure down in the pelvic floor, causing other pelvic floor issues. And so by pulling back the onion layers of what's going on and what the history is, and let's not forget that she also did have kids 20 years ago, and how her body has adapted for 20 years, um, you have to pull that back. You can't just say, oh, I have back pain and let me treat your back muscles. We have to go through the whole thing. I mean, we're working on her tongue mobility. I mean, for crying out loud, like it's all connected because there's just tension everywhere that contributes to all of these things. And I think that's really important to know. And one thing I will say to anybody listening, find providers that are functional. And what I mean by that is, especially in the PT realm and pelvic floor realm, get in with people who are putting you in your day-to-day activity positions and figure out what's happening with the muscles and the joints in your breathing in those positions compared to just laying on the table and working on your back strengthening, because laying on your table and working on that is not functional. We don't spend our days laying around.
I wish I did, but I don't.
I know.
That would be amazing.
Exactly. And so that's my biggest plug, is just really making sure that people are finding that. And if you find a really good provider, start asking them. Like, say maybe your first step is pelvic floor therapy. We have so many resources for functional med and for doulas and for mental health counselors. But maybe you started with functional med. Ask your functional med provider, who would you recommend for all of these things? Because chances are they do have some really good resources for you. And that's where I'd recommend starting.
Yeah. And I will say one thing, not that the word hasn't come up, but Courtney has not had me doing Kegel exercises.
Yeah.
Isn't that all you need? I thought that was all you needed.
No.
I mean, I've been doing those for years and I still think I need help.
Yes. Because you brought it up, I will put a little plug. Kegel Kegel exercises are strengthening of the pelvic floor and they are engagement of the pelvic floor. And we do have people engage the pelvic floor. The problem is a lot of people will be doing Kegels on their own and nobody has checked them internally. And so nobody actually knows if they're using their pelvic floor muscles to do the Kegel. And so a lot of times they're using their glutes, they're holding their breath, they're tightening their core, they're using their adductors, and that's why everybody continues to have leakage or problems is because you're trying to do the right things. It's just you need a little bit of education and assistance on making sure you're using the right muscles for the right things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've loved working with Courtney because not only am I learning more about my body and how they're all tied together, but I mean, as she alluded to, I've gone through kind of a life change during the course of our engagement, and just even how that has impacted progress to a certain extent, or even maybe caused, other symptoms or issues as we've gone through some of my therapy. So she's been very open to going down a lot of different paths with me, and also just talking me through them, and has been a great resource, and also has become a great friend.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Courtney. We're so looking forward to the Potential Within Summit, and you are participating in that with us. So thank you. June 5th in Des Moines. Please join us. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of The Potential Within, the podcast.